Good morning, y'all. My name is Eaves. I am the intern minister, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. Last Thursday, as many of you know, everybody knows, was Valentine's Day. The day in the year where our culture celebrates romantic love. And though I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the holiday, it got me thinking, what does it mean to love? Luckily, I came up with an answer. 3 answers, actually. Where the ancient Greeks spoke of 7 different kinds of love, today I would like to share with you 3. First, in light of our holiday, romantic love. A phenomenon that is one of the single most powerful forces in this life. Though, maybe not for the reasons we might think. Ultimately, I believe that romantic love is, at least in some ways, actually less about the other person. But it's more about growing you. It's more about calling you into relationality, stretching you in ways that you never thought that you could be stretched. Because in relationship, we are afforded this unparalleled opportunity to be ourselves, both the good parts of ourselves and the less good parts. My partner has this saying that relationships are the ugly mirror. That when we enter into them, we see everything about ourselves that we would rather not. But I like to reply that relationships are also the beauty mirror, that they show us parts of ourselves that we never thought were possible. And as complicated and paradoxical and frustrating as that is, we tend to agree it's the ugly mirror and the beauty mirror. My favorite spiritual author, Neil Donald Walsh, he says that romantic love only becomes problematic when we go into it looking for someone to complete us, rather than looking for folks with whom we can share our already completeness with. He argues that all of our struggles in relationships would evaporate if we just changed that one assumption. Admittedly, this is a radical departure from some of our culture's messages around love. But if we're looking for someone to complete us, chances are we're going to be facing some disappointment. But if we're looking for people with whom we can express our completeness with, both the beautiful parts and the parts that we think are ugly, creating the space where they can do the same, I think we will have begun an incredible journey. One not only worth our time and our heart and the gift of our partner's time and presence, but also worthy of our spirit. Speaking of spirit, while I was in seminary, a colleague and I were talking about Unitarian Universalism and trying to figure it out. What exactly is Unitarian Universalism? Though we were both UUs and both training to be UU ministers, we were struggling, maybe like many of you, when you're trying to give the elevator speech, putting your finger on it, exactly what it is. We threw around a few ideas, but finally, when he said, we don't have to think alike to love alike, we found our answer, our elevator speech. We both agreed that this idea that you don't have to think alike to love alike, it captures what Unitarian Universalism most embodies at its highest moments and most yearns for at its lowest. Since that conversation, I've heard this phrase used in many different UU settings and learned that it's attributed to the 16th century Transylvanian Unitarian Francis David. But I also learned that he probably didn't say it. that it was probably John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. Nevertheless, however it got here, it is here, and it's part of our shared mythos, our UU mythos, and I think it has some real promise. What if we didn't have to think alike to love alike? What if love actually had the ability to transcend differences in belief? What if we not only acknowledged that, but held fast to it? Grounded our theology, our polity, and our politics in that? Which is to say, what if we grounded our beliefs in the truth that we don't have to believe alike to love alike? Of course, that's easy when the differences are relatively minor or inconsequential or not talked about. It's a lot harder when the beliefs are very different and of great consequence, and when we must, for our own self-worth or survival, speak those beliefs aloud. And though I think this difficulty of loving alike through radical and seemingly irreconcilable differences is probably the most Herculean effort that I could pose to our movement, that I could pose to anybody, I believe that it holds great promise, and I think that there is another aspect of love that could help us with this. The second in my litany today, divine love. In that same conversation with my fellow seminarian, we talked about a metaphysic of love. Metaphysics, as defined by our friends at Wikipedia, they're super helpful, is the branch of philosophy that examines the fundamental nature of reality, the relationship between mind and matter, between possibility and actuality. The word metaphysics literally means before or after the study of the natural. So, metaphysics is the stuff beyond the stuff that we can actually measure and record and know. It's what came before creation and what comes after. It's the area where many religions position God or the gods as the personification and master of the realm. We UUs have very diverse beliefs about God and the gods, a diversity of belief that has been nothing short of salvific for those who have fled faith traditions that rigidly required them to profess certain beliefs. But I wonder what it would look like to adopt not necessarily a God of love, but a metaphysic of love. Whether that metaphysic is personified as some kind of being, or understood as existing in the essence of the atoms of the universe, or imagined as erupting within and amongst human communities whenever two or more are gathered. Regardless of however it may be conceptualized, what would it look like to adopt a metaphysic of love? What would it look like for us to not require one another to believe alike, but to nevertheless join together as folks who love alike, as folks who seek, however humbly and feebly, to acknowledge and to honor that we must love alike, not because of our shared beliefs, but because of our shared source and substance, because both ourself and every human being we encounter, whether friend or foe, is made out of love. And I'm going to go ahead and make a bold claim, as ministers are wont to do, kind of paid to do. That grounding ourselves in a metaphysic of love, not just in thought, not just in word, but in our actions, grounding and committing ourselves to this idea that love existed before we did, will exist after we pass, is the very stuff that we're made out of, and the reality to which God itself even points and prostrates. I think if we were to do that, it would look a lot like yet another aspect of love, the third of which I will share with you today. And that's the kind of love that Dr. King talked about when he shared with us his vision of the beloved community. Dr. King said that neighborly love, especially for the enemy, defines the means by which justice is established and also the goal of the struggle for freedom, namely, the beloved community. He said that through this neighborly love, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. He said, you don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. It was love that Dr. King saw as the cornerstone of his theology and his politics. However, he was quick to remind folks that I'm not talking about emotional bosh, he says. I am not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. And I'm going to repeat that, if for no one else but me. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Just as power without love is reckless and abusive. This love that need not be sentimental is the kind of love that Dr. King is talking about when he spoke of the beloved community. And it is the kind of love that we, too, can embody as individuals and a community. It's a scary kind of love at times, and it isn't always sexy. But just as an earnest embracing of a theology of love has radical implications for our personal, internal spirituality, it also has radical implications for our collective, external expressions of spirituality, our work in politics, activism, direct service, and education, our strivings for justice. As our service draws to a close, I want to share some words with you from Elie Wiesel, Jewish writer, professor, political activist, and Holocaust survivor. He says, "The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference." He goes further and he says it's indifference that is the opposite of art, not ugliness. Indifference that is the opposite of faith, not heresy. It's indifference that is the opposite of all of those things that we find most meaningful and holy. And if you're anything like me, you experience this indifference in some part of your life. But I just can't believe that this indifference is due to some kind of lack of moral character that some people are somehow able to love and that others, sadly, cannot. Instead, I believe that the demands of love are great. Whether we're called to love an individual, a community, the very mystery of life itself, love does not pull the punch. Love, as I have come to find out, is neither sentimental nor anemic. Love calls us to express ourselves not as finite human beings, but as infinite spiritual beings. And that, folks, is no small order. So, of course, our minds, when faced with such a call, experiences fear. And of course, this fear, if not transmuted and unloosed into acts of vulnerability and courage, of course, it turns into apathy. Of course, it turns into indifference. And let's also admit, we've been trained to fear. We've been trained to feel indifferent. It serves those in power. It serves to retain the status quo. But curiously, each of you are still here today. Despite the daunting demands of love, you still came to church today. And though church can be a place of great comfort, and should be, it is also a place of great challenge. It's at church, maybe more than any other place, that we allow ourselves to open up, if but a little bit, to this awesome thing called love. This thing that begs to break down and tear through with a passion and a power all of the fear and indifference that separates ourselves from our highest expression, that separates ourselves from one another. I'm glad you came today. I'm glad that you too are wrestling with and open to yet even greater understandings of what it means to love. May you be blessed with the courage and the conviction and the vulnerability to answer that call just a little bit more. May it be so. Amen.